So after watching the Jeff Geerling video on upgrading the Mac Mini SSD, I clicked through to expand Mac Mini to purchase the kit, but I was put off that they had increased the price to $320. A quick search on AliExpress found some even cheaper kits, but if you have a Taobao account, it is even cheaper than that, coming in at just over $205 with shipping. The kit itself is not bad. The SSD actually looks very much like the one in the Jeff Geerling video. Has the same yellow circle next to the NAND chip. The kit itself is sent with more than enough tools. There are 2 screwdriver handles. It actually provides 3 Torx bits that you'll need in the disassembly of the Mac Mini. There's also an assortment of lever and picks, so those are useful for getting parts off. And there's also a metal plate which you need to use to pry the bottom plate off of the Mac Mini. There's another pick there, and they also include a suction cup, which we will end up not using at all. So now we'll skip through the rest of the disassembly. I'll include a link to the iFixit guide so you can go through in your own time. But there is one thing I want to point out when disassembling the Mac Mini. As you pry the base plate off, be really careful with the connector to the power button. It is very delicate, so I would try to remove it as soon as you get the base plate off. I actually ended up breaking mine when reassembling it, but I'll touch more on that later. Just while the rest of the disassembly runs through, I'll touch on 2 important points. The first one is that you'll need another Apple M-based Silicon Mac to perform this upgrade. This is required when you put the Mac Mini into DFU mode. The second is if you don't do this upgrade soon after you buy the Mac Mini, then make sure to do a time machine backup. And it's quite easy then, when you reinitialize your Mac Mini, to restore your previous setup onto the new SSD. Now, as we come through to the final stages of the disassembly, be really careful. I didn't want to disconnect the cables, so make sure you prop them up on something so they don't snap while you're removing the old SSD. So at this point here, we've got the old SSD coming out. The lever tool comes in quite handy to remove it. And now you literally pop the new SSD in. There's a marking on the slot that tells you where the key in the socket needs to go, and it's easy as that. Reassemble it. I would actually recommend reassembling it fully. I didn't, because I thought in case something didn't work, it'd be easier to swap the SSD for the old one if I had to, but no, it's a pretty simple process. So after you reassemble your Mac, connect it all up, make sure to connect a USB-C cable into the middle cable. I'd actually recommend using an official Apple cable, and I'll expand more on why later. As you see, I didn't at this stage. So to put the Mac Mini into DFU mode, you hold down the power button while you reactivate power to the Mac Mini, and you'll see it flash up on your other Mac Mini, which it should be connected to. The blinking yellow light indicates you're in DFU mode, and you can see there's an option now on your other Mac Mini or your other Mac to restore the Mac Mini. So go ahead and click that. Now pretty much every guide on the internet at this stage shows it's pretty easy going from here, but this is actually where I encountered a lot of issues. So hopefully I'll be able to run you through what I came through and what I ended up doing, so that if you run into the same issues, you'll be able to resolve them without as much heartache as me. So here you can see there was an error message that popped up saying that the firmware file was corrupted. So I went through and downloaded it again, and I actually ran into the same issue a few times. and I ended up going through this step multiple times, tearing my hair out while I worked out what was going wrong. So I wasn't able to exactly pinpoint what the issue was. But as you can see, the update file is actually 16 gigabytes, and my other Mac only had 20 gigabytes of free space. So the first thing I went to do was delete some files off there. Now I would recommend having at least 35 gigabytes of free space on your other Mac, just to give the firmware some space to extract if it needs. The other change that I made was I went back to an actual Apple USB-C cable. So this is the one that came with the iPhone, and I'm not sure if that makes any difference, but those were the two changes that I did. And you can see now, after doing those two changes, I was finally able to restore the Mac Mini back to its factory default setting. Okay, so now that's done, I'll quickly change over my monitor input to the M4 Mac Mini, and we'll see that you pretty much just run through the setup process as you'd expect. And then, as I said, you're given the option to restore from a time machine backup, which I did, and so it's pretty painless. Once you select your time machine backup, for the Mac to restore pretty much to the Mac Mini as you're using it before the upgrade. But obviously the main difference is now that instead of having 256 gigabytes of storage, you should now see 2 terabytes of storage. So that's something I'll quickly run you through once I start up the Mac Mini. So now I'm quickly bringing up the info of the Mac Mini. So now you can see that we have 2 terabytes of storage on the Mac Mini. And if we open up the disk manager, you can see that there's 2 terabytes, and if you open up the info, it functions just exactly as the previous official Apple SSD. Now the last thing I thought I'd stress is that be really careful when you're disassembling and reassembling it. The power button connections are really fragile, and as you can see here, I snapped them off my own one. Now if you live in America, a replacement power button is available for $9, but I obviously don't. So when I have a free sec, I'm going to try solder mine back on. But the Mac Mini is otherwise working perfectly fine. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any questions, ask in the comments. Otherwise, I'll put the links below, and good luck on upgrading your M4 Mac Mini SSD.